Welcome, everybody. It's Friday night here on the Paranormal Portal, and I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you all for joining me and being a part of the journey tonight. As always, I've tried to put together an excellent show for you guys, and I think we've definitely succeeded tonight as we are welcoming a special guest, ladies and gentlemen. But before we get to that, I do have to do a little bit of laundry here. And first off, I'd just like to put this up on the screen so you guys can see it. So let me make it a little wider. There we go. This is an expo that's coming up. I'm stuttering. It's been one of those days. Some days I'm all smooth and eloquent, at least in my eyes, but then in other days I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. And that's today. So the good news is I don't have to do as much talking tonight because, of course, Maya's going to be doing some of it for me. But what I want to talk to you guys about is an expo that's coming up in June, and this is the Spokane Valley Sasquatch Roundup is coming up, ladies and gentlemen, June 17th of this year. And I'm going to be there, and Don's going to be there, and maybe Sheldon will be there. You never know. We'll try to pull him in if we can. But all of these wonderful gentlemen pictured on your screen are going to be there. And I'm speaking, of course, of Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Cliff Barrickman, Ken Gerhard, Michael Freeman, Michael Thompson, and Charles Howard Johnson are going to be there. And all of this is sponsored and brought to you by Extreme Expeditions Northwest, LLC. And it's going to be an epic event at the Spokane Valley Events Center, which is located in Spokane Valley, Washington State. So if you're able to be there, please be there, because I'd love to have a chance to meet you. I'm going to be emceeing the whole thing, so you're going to get a lot of me throughout the course of this. And a little of me goes a long way, so a lot of me might go even further. It should be a great time, and I'm really looking forward to it. So if you're able to, definitely check it out. We'd love to see you there. For more information, head over to, let me get it up here, www.exnorthwest.com. And you can find out about how to buy VIP dinner tickets and the regular admission tickets. It's just going to be a fantastic, it's a one-day event. So definitely, if you can make it, show up. We'd love to see you there. But it's going to be a fantastic journey, and I'm real honored to be a part of it. So hope to see you guys there. Again, June 17th, 2023. From 9 a.m. through 5:30 p.m. The VIP dinner is from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. So going to be a good time. Hope you guys can make it. That would be absolutely epic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me bring on our guest. This person has been a guest of mine on the podcast. We had a wonderful chat. She's just a really fun and radiant personality, and she's just incredible. So without further ado, please help me welcome to the Paranormal Portal, Miss Maya Zahira. How you doing, Maya?
Hi, Brad. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on. And I'm looking forward to having a really fun show with everybody tonight.
Absolutely. It's really exciting to have you here, and thank you so much for agreeing to come on for one of the live shows. And this is a fun experience because as you know, you did the podcast with me, and it's great, just to have a conversation and talk about the amazing phenomenon stuff. But the live show has the audience, and our audience is amazing. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this. But before we go forward, could you take a couple minutes? I could try to explain who you are, but I think you could do a much better job than I could, especially today.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally fine. So my specialty is psychic protection. And what that means is I help usually individuals. I don't tend to go in and do a lot of ghost hunting, but I'm kind of the support person for the ghost hunting endeavors. So like if a person or a family is having problems with unwanted paranormal activity, I am helping them get to the bottom of what's going on and helping them clear it. I'm also an educator. So the main thing that I do full time is I have an online program where I teach people how to do all of these things. I teach all the people who are having the challenges how to clear out the issues. And I'm also an author, and I've got 2 books, The Psychic Attack Source Book and Darkness Disguised as Light. And so I know a lot about all the psychic attack, negative energies, empath issues, how to keep your energy clean and clear, all that stuff. But tonight, I thought it would be fun if we just got into some interesting side categories of talking about elementals, earth spirits, fairies, gnomes, elves, because I've had a number of experiences with all of those, and I bet the listeners have as well. So this might be a fun sharing session for all of us. So start thinking about if you've had any encounters with any earth elementals, because there might be an opportunity to share today. And anything else you want to add?
Well, I think that what was I was going to say something, and now it completely slipped my mind. I was going to say that the phone lines are open, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a story that you'd like to share with Maya and myself and the audience, please by all means feel free to use that number. That number is pinned to the chat right now on the top, so you can always see it. But we'd love to hear from you. If you're going to comment in the chat, please do so by at least capitalizing all the letters of what you're typing. Just hit the caps lock and start typing. Or even better if you put at Paranormal Portal at the beginning of it, because then it gives me this big yellow box around my name so that I can zoom in on it a lot easier. So yeah, that'll be fantastic. And maybe if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about what is the differences? Now, here's the thing. I've always been a big believer that legends probably started with some kind of truth, and I think that oftentimes we hear things like elementals and we hear things like the fae and gnomes and things like that, and we just go, that's just children's fluff, from ages ago. But I do believe they're out there, and I think that we're probably swimming in a world of spirit, both of different levels and maybe frequency, But how do you tell what kind of spirit you're dealing with, whether it's an elemental or something else like the Fae or whatever? Is there indicators that people could look for? Because I don't think most people really can dial that in. And I'm one of them. I'm not, trying to elevate myself here. I'm kind of in the dark about it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I think I'll answer that in two ways. The first thing that I'll say is that the stories that I'm going to share tonight are personal encounters that I didn't necessarily believe that those kinds of beings existed. And then all of a sudden I had an encounter with them.
Oh.
and to me, it was really obvious. Like I saw that I saw the beings, and then I also just like knew. So I had a cognizant, clear knowing, like this is a gnome. I just knew, right?
Okay, sure.
When I've worked with clients who've had issues and who've had encounters, I've used my intuitive skills to discern what kind it was. But really, I think it would be a matter of, if somebody's interested in learning about elementals, doing a Google search and just reading about the different types and the different qualities that they have, but also keeping in mind that there's a lot of folklore that's woven in that's not necessarily like 100% truth.
Sure.
Right? Because it's just like stories, that kind of storybook stuff, but then there's the personal experiences. So you can read up on it, but also trust your gut.
Right. Okay. And that's cool. And I think that with your ability to hone in on that is pretty powerful. But I think you're right. I think that probably at least some of the folklore tales may have good indicators of things to look for. We did have a couple questions in the chat. What is an elemental? Because I think a lot of people have heard the term, but aren't really sure what does that mean. So would you again suggest that they look that up, or do you have kind of a short form answer?
Let's give a short form answer so people have an idea what the heck we're talking about. But I think they would figure it out as I went into the stories. So an elemental is basically an umbrella term for a variety of different kinds of earth spirits. For example, fairies, gnomes, elves, etc. Now, I also want to say
Excuse me.
I don't specialize in elementals, so I'm not like the person who's written, like I had somebody say to me, oh, you should write a book on elementals. And I was like, maybe that'll happen at some point, but I don't specialize in it. Like I know basically I've had firsthand experiences with certain kinds of elementals. And because of that, those are the ones that I know about because I met them. But there are other kinds of elementals I literally know nothing about. So I'm going to share what I know, and we'll see what some stories that the audience has as well. Right.
Now I've got to ask also how, and maybe this is impossible to answer, so I might be putting you on the spot a little bit, but how common are interactions with these beings, do you think? These specific elemental type beings versus, ghosts and demons or jinn or any other number of possible beings?
So I've never had anyone ask me that before, but as you were asking it, I was getting an answer. And so let's put this into words succinctly.
Okay.
The feeling that I'm getting is that the various elementals do not necessarily present themselves to all humans. They tend to be more private, but certain people, they will make themselves known. And from my observation, they would tend to make themselves known more to individuals who who are really connected with nature, who have a love of nature, and who are tending to the earth and not abusing the earth. And actually, the opposite can be true, where if there are people who are abusing the earth, some elementals can show up angry and do little mischievous things and like take your belongings and make things disappear. Luckily, I haven't had any encounters like that because I'm a lover of nature.
Right.
But, you know, I think there are a lot of people that have not had encounters with elementals. And the people that I know who spend a lot of time outdoors and really connecting with the earth, I think your chances are going to go up. So if you're wanting to have an encounter, say, for example, then go get your butt outside and spend like many hours out there, whether it's gardening or hiking or sitting in nature. And even better, if you get yourself into like either a meditative zone state or kind of a zoned out, like empty mind type of state where your monkey mind is shut off and you're just totally present with the environment that you're in. And then your intuitive senses, your intuition will be more open so that the chances will be higher for you to see or sense something.
Oh, okay, cool. We do have a comment in the chat. It says, from Anne Botelier, or I think is how you say it. If you believe, you'll recognize them. I've moved 3 times in 5 years, and the elementals around my home came with me to the city. I'm so happy they did. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And I'm so glad that Anne joined us tonight. And it reminds me to just say, some people are like magnets for fairies or certain elementals, that the fairies or other types of elementals just love that particular person so much, and they just are hanging out with that person, whether they live in nature or in the city. And Anne is one of those people. And there are others too. And it's just I think it's because they just have a wonderful, delightful energy that the fairies really love.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's kind of cool to meet people like that.
Yeah. And another comment in here, Rachel gets it right. One of our mods says, can elementals be formless like wind? One winter as a child, I felt like I could predict the motions of wind flowing or blowing around me when I was on a small snowbank. So is it possible that she was interacting with an elemental that was more formless like a wind?
Well, then we also get into going a little bit broader than the fairies and the gnomes and the elves and all, et cetera, et cetera. We get into really the energies, like the consciousness of the elements, earth, air, fire, water, etc. And we also even can extend from there and get into the consciousness of the plants. And I do have a few stories where that I'll share about plants, but it sounds to me like there was definitely something happening there with a consciousness of on the wind. And I think Rachel knows it, right? Yeah. Is it Rachel?
Yeah, it was Rachel. Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. Would you say that those are more primal forces then? I don't mean to indicate that they're not there's no sentience or intelligence, but that they are, maybe some of the first, formative spirits of this world. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I like that you described it that way, because that really resonates for me as well. I think that's how I would describe them.
Oh, fantastic. Primal. Yeah. Okay. And Luna Moonicorn says, what are Maya's thoughts on fairy gardens and garden gnomes? Are they welcoming to positive spirits, creatures, or are they dangerous, calling in things?
I've talked to people over the years who have like warned against fairies, and there are all these bad fairies out there. And I I've never once ever had a negative experience with fairies, but maybe it depends on the person. And if somebody is like trashing the earth,
Sure.
they're probably going to attract more negative fairies. I don't feel like we need to worry. This is my opinion, but I think everyone should tap into what your inner guidance says for you. I don't ever worry about putting out garden gnomes or creating a fairy garden or trying to do things that will attract them or that they will like, because in my experience, they love that. Yeah. They love being acknowledged. And I've never had a negative experience with that. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Yeah. And I would agree. I think, even in terms of several paranormal stories where things were going really, really badly. I've heard of like shamans coming in and saying, well, it's a spirit of the land that's very angry and you should plant a fruit tree. And as soon as they do, by showing, a gift to this spirit, then activity can calm right down and even nullify. And I think that's the same spirit. By honoring something, you're probably not going to bring forth negative experience, but of course, by doing negative things to the world around us, I imagine they would get a little uptight with that, because I think these things are very inextricably linked to the natural world around us, is my take on it. And I could be wrong. Like I said, I don't pretend to know a whole bunch, but I guess that's what my gut, that these things are very, very much a part of the natural balance, and they are, quote unquote, the spirit of the things around us, in many ways.
I think you bring up a really important point, and that is just simply acknowledging the land and the energies around us. Whether you live in the city or out in the country, it doesn't matter. You're still on Earth. You're still in Earth energy. You actually are Earth energy. You are you are not separate from it. But as a being existing here, it's important to acknowledge the ancestors of the land, the spirits of the land, the plants, the animals that are cohabitating there with you, and to bless the land. Like, truly, no matter what your ancestry is, we all should be guardians of the land and blessing the land wherever you live, and giving blessings to all the plants and the animals. And if your intention is to be in harmony with the elements and the earth energies around you, you're going to have much better experiences, with the energies around you, and less of those experiences, like you mentioned, Brent, with the shaman who was helping people who were having problems on their land. Yeah,
I think it's great to always try to live in balance. Yeah, absolutely. Grandmaster UV, portal on point, son. Well, thanks, Grandmaster UV. I appreciate that. And remember, folks, the phone lines are open if any of you want to call in and speak with Maya and myself. You are sure welcome to. Again, the number is pinned on top of the chat. I'm happy to continue to read your comments if that's what you're more comfortable with. But if you would like to call in, that is always an option. So can you walk us through a little bit of these experiences that you've had, Maya?
Sure. All of these stories are just really short little vignettes, but they're all really cool stories. So the first one I'm going to start with is one that happened a long time ago. It was about 25 years ago, and I was living in Kansas, and I was having a lot of health issues at the time. And it was the middle of the day. I was lying in bed, just taking a rest. And I mentioned that it was daytime because it's important to acknowledge that it wasn't dark and it wasn't the middle of the night. I wasn't sleeping. And I was just resting in bed. And I saw these like little dark things, like really little, like this, come into the room. And I thought, like, at first it looked like shadows, these little dark shadows. And then as they came closer, I thought, are those flies? Like, I really thought there were flies coming at me. And then they came even closer. It was a whole bunch of them. They came even closer. And when I saw them up close, they were these little tiny fairy looking things.
Oh,
I don't think I had any encounters with fairies that I can recall before that. But I didn't even know if fairies existed or not. So it was this kind of funny experience where I'm like, oh, I didn't even know if they existed or not, or if it was just children's tales. And then I see these things that I'm like, are those flies? No, it gets closer. I can make out their distinct, figures. And the one thing that really stood out was that their wings moved so fast that their wings were a blur.
Oh,
and then there were a whole bunch of them. They were all in my energy field. And the only thing that I could interpret is that they came in and they were working on my energy field to like just help me or support me. And then one was right by my ear, and I kid you not, I heard this like really high pitched voice, and it was like this. It was like if you're listening to a tape or a record and you speed up the speed.
Oh, sure.
And it sounds like high pitched Munchkin voice, like really fast.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell what it said. It did sound like a female voice, but I'm not really. I think it was female, but then it got me to thinking. I think I had read or heard somewhere that the fairy realm exists in a different type of time than us, which is why when you hear the tales of people getting lost in the fairy realm and they're gone for like an hour and then or a day, and then they come back into the earth, into the human realm, and it's like 50 years later.
Yes.
It's because time functions differently with them. And that was the first thing that I thought when I heard that, like it was like a sped up voice. And then after that, they all dissipated. There was one that one that I heard in my ear. There were several times over the years that I felt like she was still present with me, kind of like as a spirit guide or a helper. But I feel like she's not with me anymore. Actually, to be honest, when I started to really get into doing the psychic protection work, I got this very strong feeling from her that she was like, you know what, this is a little too intense. I'm out. And so she exited, which was totally fine. I totally respect that.
Right.
But yeah, it was a very odd experience. And I mean, at the time, I don't think I told hardly anybody because I didn't think really anyone would believe me. But I totally thought there were flies coming into my room. And then it wasn't flies. It was something else. And there's different kinds of psychic vision. There's ways of like seeing things in your mind's eye that would be considered a psychic vision. But this was something like I was seeing it outside of my mind's eye. I was seeing it in the room all around me. And I was looking around going, oh, I wonder what they're doing. Maybe they're like fixing my energy field because I'm so depleted from being sick. So who knows? But it's an interesting story.
It is. And E. Dungarian in the chat said, did the fairies look like little humans or more like humanoid insect plant beings?
Good question. So the way they looked to me was like little humans. But would there be other people in the world that maybe have had other experiences where they've looked differently? Possibly. But to me, they definitely looked like little humanoid beings.
Okay, gotcha. And someone else said something. I got to scroll up a little bit. I missed it. Ninja Dave in our chat says, I don't believe we'd have so many names and descriptions for these various things like elementals, gnomes, trolls, and fae if they weren't real. That's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. And then Rachel, again, is saying, are people more likely to have fairy encounters in houses, which are separate homes, than in an apartment building, which has many other human dwellings are next to each other?
I don't know that would make a difference.
Okay. So
I think it kind of depends on the person.
Okay.
And I know people who are fairy magnets who live in apartment high rises.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's not what you'd expect, though, is it? But I guess you're right. I mean, it's even our buildings are made of earth, and steel and minerals and stuff. So I guess it all probably would resonate the same. But oftentimes when we think of things like fae and the fairies, we envision them in the wildest places, the untamed wilderness, dancing and frolicking. But I guess they could, be anywhere, really.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, as you said, you only saw them this one time, or did you ever see them represented again like that?
I never saw them represented again like that. But then several years later, I had experiences with other elementals. And it was interesting because it was the same deal where I didn't necessarily believe that those other elementals existed. And yet here they were showing up. So that was kind of cool.
That is cool. That is cool. Maggie is asking in the chat, is there anything other than love and caretaking of nature that can attract elementals in certain people? So like, is there other acts? Now I've heard, and again, this is kind of just references that I've read that some people claim planting flower gardens is with, especially with specific flowers, can attract the fae, they believe, much like butterflies. And I've also heard people claim that if you're seeing a butterfly, it could be, or a dragonfly, that sometimes those are fae in disguise. And I don't know personally what to do with that, but those are certainly things that I've heard. Do you have any opinion on any of that?
Well, I do think that if someone wants to attract more fairies, that even if they're living in an apartment high rise, that if you collect a lot of plants and you love on your plants, you give them lots of love, you talk to your plants, then I do think that even just that can increase your chances. I think anything's possible as far as the fairies and the dragonflies. Sure. As I was listening to you talk about that, I was thinking of a time last year when I was sitting outside. I live in nature now, and I was sitting outside, and there was literally, I don't know if it was a dragonfly, but something dive bombed me, almost hit me in the face. And my immediate thought was, I got a hit that it was a fairy. Now, I didn't clearly see it, but
sure,
and then I think really anything is possible as far as the butterflies and the dragonflies. But I'm what I call an open-minded skeptic, which means I will consider that anything is possible.
Oh yeah.
But I'm not necessarily going to assume every time I see a butterfly that it's a fairy, because also butterflies are an important part of the ecosystem themselves.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. I think that they're just a part, just so intertwined with the natural world around us that, I definitely agree with that. The Pharmacy Seeds Network in chat says, I actually saw a fairy one day in an apple tree at the farm. I did a triple take and then tried to move in slowly and get my camera out. Well, she flew away. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. That's incredible. Yeah.
Well, I'm so curious if they want to share, were they similar to what I described, where they were really little, right, or were they bigger? I mean, perhaps there are different sizes of fairies, or they present themselves in different ways, and who knows? So I would be curious about that.
Yeah, I would be too. And then he says, was very cool. Wished I hadn't tried to photograph. Wondered what might have happened had I not tried. And I, it makes you wonder, are they, okay, so in a lot of different phenomena, it almost seems like there's an aversion to be photographed. And I don't know what it is, because people will see apparitions, and granted, the paranormal's like catching lightning in a bottle. It just, happens when it happens, how it happens, and you can't prepare all the time. But there's, people that have talked about seeing it and they raise their camera and it's gone, or, or they think about grabbing their phone and then it's just gone when they look back. So there does seem to be like, I don't know if there's rules to this or what, that they are not supposed to be photographed, or if they just don't want to be photographed, or what that is. But it does intrigue me, because it seems as if it's an unwritten rule somewhere. It's almost like in ghost phenomena, people will have communication maybe through EVPs or whatever. And once they ask, what's it like on the other side? It goes dead. It's just like, that's when the communication ends. And people receiving ghostly phone calls, they're actually hearing their loved one. And then once, well, what's it like there? Then it's dead. And it's like, there's some kind of wall that gets hit with these things. So I don't know. What do you think, Maya?
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I see that that's all pretty similar across the board.
Right.
However, with elementals, I think there's another factor. And my experience, because I've had some other experiences with elementals, and my observation has been that they tend to be private and selective in who they want to present themselves to.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So they don't want to just like interact with everyone, but if they feel that they can trust a person, then like let's say you're living on some land, the elementals there might not present themselves immediately. Well, maybe they will. It depends. But in the situations that I experienced, they kind of needed to get to know me first and make sure that I was trustworthy. And they don't necessarily, the local elementals don't necessarily want to interact with everyone else in the area where I'm living.
Oh, that is curious. And I suppose maybe they do have enough knowledge of our world to know that, hey, if they take a picture of me, I'm being presented to all kinds of people I don't want to be presented to. So maybe there is that awareness or some kind of, understanding. One other question in the chat, and I don't know the answer to this, and I don't know if you will either, but it's from Eric in the chat. He says, what is the elemental at Leap Castle in Ireland? Are you familiar with that at all, Maya?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
So just say, I don't know the answer, but I do want to add one thing to the previous thread of conversation. And it's that what I've noticed with some elementals, the reason why they're private is for safety reasons. Oh. They don't want humanity to figure out like exactly where they are and what they're doing, and to trash their land, because they've had that experience many times.
Sure. Yeah. I think that they've well, it's got to be tough to be, if they are indeed intertwined with an area, and then to watch these huge equipment come in and just plow their area down and put a parking lot up. That's got to be like the worst thing ever. I would think that has got to be a heartbreaker.
Or even just a bunch of people who are not caring for the land, coming in with cameras and stomping all over things, and like, I want to see a fairy, but just like kicking over things and not having any care for the area. They don't want that. The elementals don't want that. So they don't present themselves to just anybody.
Absolutely. Stephanie Hardy, Fairy Mermaid Queen, in the chat says, I think I have many fairies who live in my plants. They love crystals. Huh.
Yes, they do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it for the same reason that we love crystals as energy amplifiers and focus points for energies, or what would that reason be?
Yeah. So, well, I do think fairies love plants. They love flowers. They love crystals. It's all about the energy, the earth elemental energy. So, I know that crystals are really big in New Age spirituality and everything, but let's kind of backtrack from that and recognize that that crystals. I think I caught what you had earlier with the blah, that crystals are minerals from the earth. It's very primal energy. It's very primal earth energy.
Oh, sure.
So if we think of it that way, rather than like, oh, it's New Age, whatever, like, yeah, maybe that's so. But that's not, like, the fairies don't care about New Age. They care about primal earth energies, and that's why they love natural areas. They love waterfalls. They love plants. They love flowers. They love birds singing and butterflies and crystals and all of that, all of the natural elements.
Oh, fantastic. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, we had a phone call. Farm, yeah, we're taking calls, brother. Call in. I think you hung up. Yes, please call. I started out with no, but he asked, unless you're not taking phone calls, and I answered, no, we're definitely taking calls, Farm. Get to you in a second. So when he calls back in, we'll get to that. But in the meantime, John Stevenson in the chat says, what's the difference between elementals and nature spirits? Is there that much of a difference between them?
Well, so there might be somewhere that has some official definition, but I'll just share how I define it. Mm-hmm. I use earth elementals as a big umbrella term. And then under that, we have fairies, gnomes, elves, etc., and also plant spirits. I think he was asking about earth spirits as well.
Yeah.
Like any the spirits of the wind, the spirits of the mountains where I live, like everything. If you are a believer in animism, that everything has a consciousness, which I believe in. Yep, I connect with the spirits of the mountains near me. The tree right outside my back door has a consciousness, and it's all. I mean, I think it really all falls under the umbrella of elementals, elemental energy.
Yeah.
Some people might define it differently, and that's totally fine. Sure. But that's how I define it.
Okay. Well, we do have a call now, and this, I believe, is our good friend, Mr. Pharmacy Seeds Network. Are you there, Farm?
Hey, how's it going, Brent? Hello, Maya. Good to meet you.
Hey.
Yeah. So you were asking about my fairy experience.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll throw down a little context for it as well, or at least context as I see it. Maybe it's totally irrelevant. Who knows? But it was back when I was at the farm, and the landlord's son had come up, and he was like 19 or so, just kind of an out of control college kid who abused Adderall. He was just like this chaotic explosion onto the farm. And it made farming and that whole property just very difficult, and it was quite the vexation. Anyway, he was there for a couple of months. Kind of couldn't really say anything because he was a landlord's kid, but he did finally. He was raising heck all over the property, just like making noise and shooting off guns and driving cars around and just crashing into things. But he finally crashed his dad's truck off into the bushes and into one of the targets of one of my friends.
Oh,
and
no.
that was like the final straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah. And he ended up getting kicked off the farm by his grandmother because of that.
Oh.
So after he left, I went back to farming and was very relieved to have a peaceful farm again.
Oh, bad.
And it was like within a couple of weeks of him leaving, on a rainy, cloudy day, I was down by one of the apple trees, and I look over and like there's birds chirping and flying around. And I look over and I see this little fairy thing fly up and like light on a branch. And I'm like, I look away and I look back. I'm like, I'm like just fantasizing and seeing shit, right? Like this can't possibly be. And I look back and sure enough, it's there.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, wow. And I probably watched for maybe 5 or 10 seconds, just watched her kind of like flutter over the branch.
Wow.
And like tried to get a better look at her, but for some reason it was hard to get a clear image of her. Mm. Now she was probably 100 feet away or so, somewhere between 80 and 100 feet away, I would say. So it was a ways off, but she was really small. She was like the size of maybe like a vitamin C bottle or something like that, right?
Okay.
And so then I kind of like broke out of like I don't know, like I wouldn't say trance, but almost trance of like just like, shock, I guess it was. And I had my phone camera in my pocket and I reached for it and I pulled it out and I unlocked it and I went to point it and I just got this like, I don't know how to say it. It was just a feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as at the same moment I had that feeling, she like fluttered off and took off into the woods. Oh. And I didn't see her again. And I went over to the apple tree and I looked and I kind of like tried to kind of like casually, quietly, gently follow her, but she had already taken off. But yeah, it was a wild experience. And I'd never had that before. I'd been on that farm for probably 10 or more years and I've never had anything like that since, but I thought I would share the story. And but it was interesting.
That's really interesting.
So
go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So do you feel like one of the reasons why the fairy was hard to really see clearly could have been either because she was existing in time differently than how you were existing in time, or because she was bleeding through from a very nearby dimension, but not totally in this dimension. What is your feeling on that?
Oh, boy. Well, let me throw some context on my answer to that. First of all, at the time, I just attributed it to low light, but I can remember that whole sequence like a clear video in my head, like a high-def video, because it was so impressive to me. And when I think back on it, I think it was more like she's in like a shifted dimension or something, because just the way it came across, it was almost like she was like a holograph, right? Like that would be how I would describe it. It looked almost like a holograph. It was really weird.
That is really wild. Yeah, that's pretty powerful, though. I mean, you had never seen anything like that before or since?
No. And I held that one close. I was like, wow, that was a cool experience. And I spent, the rest of that week just going, I can't believe I saw that. Did I really see that? No, I definitely saw it. Wow. But how? What?
Maybe it was it was kind of maybe it was kind of like celebrating the absence of that painful 19-year-old sore that you had there.
Well, I look back at it now after hearing what Maya was saying before about, how they like kind of sense a person's spirit or intent or whatever.
Sure.
And I think that's probably on point because when I came to that farm, one of those backfields had been poisoned to death with atrazine, and it had been dead for like 30 years. And I re-inoculated that field and got it growing green again. I cleaned that property up and made it, a beautiful piece of healthy living land again.
Well, that's probably,
they probably got that. They understood that.
Yeah. As we've stated throughout the show, and I'm sure you would agree, Farm, that if these things are probably really tied to the natural world around us. And so, I mean, they were probably really graciously, thrilled that you did that because it was just a dead piece of dirt for them, but you brought it back to life.
For sure. And, something Maya said before really struck me. I forget what the other word she used, but when she said that primal earth energy, that like really hit me as I think that's probably accurate. Just, reflecting back on my experience with that and with other things too that, I can't think of off the top of my head, but that sort of realm of experiences.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. I know as having watched and listened to you for years, watched your videos and stuff on how you do your agriculture and how it's kept in balance, and you take great pride in, not throwing chemicals and pesticides on everything. You do it in really natural and holistic ways. I mean, what you're doing is really powerful anyway. So I can imagine if they were going to show themselves to anyone, it makes sense that you're one of them.
Well, I'm humbled by that. Thank you. But, I think it's just awesome that they did. I'm honored. If anything.
I think I would be too. I think that's the way I would walk away from it too. Just feeling like, wow, because I really do think it was a conscious revealing. Like, it's not just, oh, you happen to be in the right place at the right time when that thing just happened to be there. It just sounds like it was much more conscious than that, especially when you were talking about taking out your phone. And then it just kind of went, no, okay, okay, I got to go. I got to run.
I'm sorry, sir. You are violating the agreement. I'm leaving.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's really cool, brother. That's really, really cool. Man, good job, man. Well, I appreciate you calling in and sharing that, brother. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Anytime, man. Carry on. Great show. Thank you for bringing awesome guest stuff, Maya, and all the great information that you brought us. Keep it up.
We will, brother. Thank you.
Thanks.
Peace, Brett.
Peace out. See ya.
Yeah. Thanks. I felt I got this very strong psychic hit as he was sharing his story. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about how he repaired that whole area of land. I got this very strong hit that all of the elementals and specifically the fairies were just thrilled, totally thrilled that he did that. They were super happy. And I do think it was, like you guys were saying, I think it was an intentional, they showed, or at least that one fairy intentionally showed itself. It was just like a little like, hey, thanks. Yeah. We really appreciate what you did.
Thanks for bringing it back. It was a real eyesore before. Yep. No, I think that's fantastic. So we got a question from Sasquatch, and this is kind of a different question. I don't know if you'll have any idea about this or not, or see what comes to you, but do the fairies interact with Bigfoot?
Oh. Well, I've never been asked that before. Yeah. So I think what I'll say is I don't have a definitive answer on that. And so when I share things with you guys and I say like, it's this or it's that, like, I definitely know that it's true. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say that I know anything definitive about this. Right. But I just feel like it makes sense that there would be interactions. Sure. Because just I don't think that they're from the same dimension. I think probably most people would agree with me on that, but that they are interacting in nearby dimensions. Like the fairies are very near to our human dimension, and Bigfoot is also, according to what a lot of people believe, existing in a nearby dimension and comes through. Mm-hmm. And when he comes through, then there's sightings. And so sooner or later, some of them are bound to run into each other, wouldn't you think?
Sure. Yeah. And just, they're being in the wild places, I'm sure they're probably all somehow aware of each other, at least in some part. Now, we had a guest on, Robin Moonshadow, who deals with proto-pygmies and little people, much like, the Pukwudgies and such. And she says that the little people can and apparently do live in the same areas as Sasquatch, and they don't because they don't compete on the same level for the same resources. So it's not unusual to find little people prints and traces in the same areas where you're seeing Sasquatch. So, and I think that's probably true. And I guess it would probably be the same for the Fae and other things out there, that they would live probably in balance with each other just fine. But I think I don't pretend to know, but
yeah. And just, I always enjoy listening to the show because, I haven't had, at least so far, firsthand experiences with any Sasquatch or any cryptids. So I don't have any firsthand experience with that yet, but I have a lot of experience with the spiritual stuff and with a little bit of alien stuff and with the elemental realm. So I probably can't answer too many questions if it's about cryptids or Bigfoot and all of that. But I find it super interesting. I love hearing all the stories because I learn from that.
Yeah, yeah, which is exactly my case too, because I used to think I knew all about this stuff until I started a show and started talking to people and hearing what's out there, and I realized I don't know anything. Sue James in the chat has an interesting question, and I suppose you're the perfect person to answer it. It says, is having empathy the same or similar to being an empathic, or to being empath?
Okay, I can totally define that. Perfect. That's right up my alley. Okay, so having empathy versus being an empath. Those are two different things. Having empathy is either a natural characteristic or something that you can learn to do when interacting with other people and other beings and animals and etc. So having empathy means that you are connecting with and relating to how that person or being must be feeling, what their experience must be like for them. And so it's a way of relating to them. It's not just sympathy. It's beyond sympathy. It's like putting yourself in their shoes and really feeling for them.
Right.
That's having empathy. And there are some people who have a very high level of empathy naturally. It's just part of their personality. They can really empathize and feel for people who are hurting. But other people maybe don't have that natural quality, so they have to learn how to be a good friend and how to really listen and hold space for other people and have that compassion for others. So having empathy is about having compassion and really putting yourself in their shoes. Being an empath is actually a different thing. It has to do with a particular psychic skill set. So the empath psychic skill set is about feeling other people's either emotions or physical sensations in your body. So if you're sitting on the bus next to somebody who's really sad, but their face looks normal, but deep down they're really lonely or sad, and you're sitting next to them, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, for no reason, you feel really lonely and sad, and you don't know why, and you're overwhelmed by this feeling. Or maybe it's anxiety or some other emotion that's not yours, but it's somebody else's. So that's emotional empathy. And then there's physical empathy, which is that you're sitting next to somebody who has a splitting headache, and you sit down next to them, and suddenly you have a splitting headache because you are feeling what they are feeling.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's actually a lot of other kinds of empath psychic skills, but those are the two main ones, and I hope that answers their question.
It does. I hope it does too. But yeah, I mean, it was a good answer. Eric in the chat says, "Paranormal Portal, you need to move to northern Idaho, and you will." that's where I am, Eric. I'm in the north tip of Idaho. Yeah, I'm here. I'm here already. I've seen a lot of weird stuff up here. Let me just put that out there first of all. And if you want to hear more about the things I've seen, you can listen to other shows where I've been a guest and interviewed, and you'll hear a bunch of my experiences. Plus, if you tune in regularly here, you'll hear them over time, but not in no specific order, just where they're relevant. But yeah, I've seen orbs, and it's been suggested to me that perhaps these orbs that I saw could have been Fae as well. Have you heard of Fae appearing as orbs?
Yes.
Okay.
That's pretty common.
Okay.
And actually, when I first moved out to where I'm living now in rural southern Arizona in the Sonoran Desert, I took a picture, and literally, like right, like in the middle of the picture, in like a few feet ahead of me, there was this little green light. And yes, there are times when like dust can reflect and create what looks like an orb. And I think that can definitely happen. Sometimes orbs can be spirits and other types of entities. In that case, when I saw the picture on my phone, I immediately thought, oh, wow, this is a fairy.
Oh, okay.
Because I just felt I had worked so hard to get back out in nature, like that's where I really thrive, and I was stuck living in town where I didn't really want to live. Sure. And so it was like, welcome, we're going to show up in your picture. So it was like a little welcome gift.
That's sweet.
Yep.
And Eric did clarify, he meant that for you, that if you move to northern Idaho, you will see a Sasquatch.
Well, let's talk about regional stuff. Again, just from my own personal experience, I had a lot of elemental encounters when I was living in Kansas, which I might have a chance to talk about today. But then when I moved to Arizona, which is a totally different environment. It's a desert environment. Now, it's not just sand dunes. There are plants out here and certain kinds of trees, but it's not green and lush. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I found it very fascinating that I just wasn't finding a lot of elementals. Even when I would tune in intuitively and just kind of like reach out my feelers, so to speak, like, where are they? Right. And so when I moved out to a more rural area, I am rural, but on the other side of me, there's like, it's kind of a neighborhood. And then out this way, it's all undeveloped land. Oh. And every time I go outside out that way, I put out my intuitive feelers, it feels like the elementals are mostly away from here because they don't want to be close to the people, and they're like way down in the valley. Oh. And they have a whole community out there, different kinds of elementals. Oh. And the feeling that I got was that, again, that they don't want to come close right. to all of the people who might not appreciate them, but also that it seemed like they were just not as prevalent, because when I would just travel around different places in the Midwest where it's a lot more green and lush, I was finding a lot of indications of elementals, like just kind of everywhere. And I had to look harder to find them here. And in fact, when I first moved here, I thought, are they just not here? Oh. Because when I moved here, I wanted to connect with the elementals because I had a very strong connection with them at the last place where I lived in Kansas, outside of a farm land, before I moved to Arizona. For the weather, I wanted a warmer climate, but there were tons of elementals out at that farm area house. And then I really had to work harder to find them out here. And I wonder, if it's just like the difference between lush areas where there's more trees and grass compared to, it is a lot more barren out here compared to, I'm sure compared to Iowa or Idaho, sorry, Idaho. So that could be part of it.
Sure. Okay.
Possibly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Rachel in the chat says, if we befriend crows, ravens, or any other birds, do the fairies take notice and find that something that attracts them to the area?
Well, I feel like it's not just crows and ravens, but that if we befriend any birds, any animals, I think they feel safer with the elementals will feel safer with us because we are acting in a more harmonious way, interacting in with more harmony with the environment around us. So they're going to feel more comfortable.
Okay.
But yeah, connecting with crows and ravens is definitely a special kind of medicine for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty incredible animals, or birds, I guess are animals. Yeah. So very cool. I'm just looking through I know I've been missing, or I'm behind a little bit on the questions. Here we go. Eric, he says I lived in Benewah County, southeast of Coeur d'Alene. Yeah, I'm just north of Coeur d'Alene, Eric. So, it's just right up in the tip here. So very cool. Very cool. Wouldn't hurt them. Just looking through here. In the meantime, do you want to talk about one of your other experiences with like plant?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, totally. I'll follow your lead and share a couple of plant stories while you're looking through comments.
Sure.
Okay. So, look at my notes here. The first one, happened about 10 years ago. And at that time, I was living in a different place in Kansas, and I was living out in the middle of nowhere. I was like 30 minutes from the nearest gas station. I was living in a little cabin and spending tons of time in quiet solitude and time in nature. And there was this one afternoon where I literally was digging in this big bed of earth and pulling weeds and working in this area where there were a bunch of flowers, mostly zinnias, which are like a really happy, uplifting flower.
Okay.
And I just like had my head in this garden. I'm like digging, and I don't know how long I was out there. And I just, if you're gardening or you're working on whatever task it is for a while, you do go into kind of a zone where you're not really thinking about anything. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden I felt this communication from the flowers.
Oh, neat.
And it was not auditory. I didn't hear a voice, and it wasn't just like a gut feeling. It was more like a telepathic. It came into my mind, and it was the name of a plant called cajeput. And I heard it very clearly, and I had no idea what that plant was, but I immediately knew that I was told that plant because it would help me with supporting my health.
Oh, neat.
And I looked it up. So I went and I looked it up on the computer, and sure enough, it was exactly something that is used for the whatever things I had going on at the time.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I've had a couple of situations like that. And then I had a couple of encounters a few years after that when I was living in the suburbs in the Kansas City area. And there was one time when I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I walked past this like shelf that had a house plant on it. And some of you may already know that when you're in the half awake, half asleep state, if some intuitive or psychic information is going to come through, it's very easy for it to come through because your monkey mind is shut off. You're just open.
Yeah.
So I walk to the bathroom and I'm just kind of like, bleary eyed, and I see the house plant, and I literally see a face in the house plant. It was the plant spirit.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. Wow. And I looked at it. I was like, whoa, I just saw the spirit of that plant. And then at that same house in the suburbs, there was another time when a friend of mine was over, had just come over to visit, and she was walking in the front door, and she turned and she looked at the tree that was, it was this big tree that was basically taking up the whole front yard. Mm-hmm. And she turned and she looked at the tree, and she looked back at me, and she said, she pointed at the tree and she said, "Do you see that?" And I looked and I said, "Oh my gosh, I do see it." And there was literally a face in the tree, and we both saw it.
How neat is that? Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've often believed that there is consciousness in everything, as we were talking about earlier. And I mean the rocks, the soil, the sky, the clouds, the plants, all of the different aspects of our natural world. There's a consciousness there. And I think it becomes it becomes more and more believable when you look into things like on Mythbusters, and I brought this up several times on the show, and I know most people think, well, that's a stupid plant, it's just growing and it doesn't know what the hell's going on, and you like it or you pull it, throw it away, whatever. But Mythbusters did this test. It was the 3 younger people. It was back when it was on regular TV and all that on Discovery or whatever, and they did a test with the plants, and they had the 3 younger people, Carrie and Grant and that one other guy that I don't remember his name, but they all 3 took different roles, and they went into this room with plants, and one person went in all kind and loving and nice, and they had all these plants wired up to show biofeedback from the plants, like what was going on. So the first person went in all kind and lovey and adoring these plants and speaking to them, singing, whatever, and then after a period of time left. And then the next guy went in, and he was just kind of indifferent, just wandering through, looking at the plants, and left. And the third guy, I think his name was Tori, now it's come to me, and he went in and grabbed a stick and literally beat the hell out of one of the plants, just thrashed it, just trashed it, and all of these other plants. Now, he left once he was done with that. And remember, these plants are connected for some kind of biofeedback, and I'm not sure what it is, if it's an electroencephalogram or whatever, that they could pick up the impulses. The woman that went in was so kind and nice. They actually seemed like they were showing a pleasured response. And this is just her walking into the room, not doing the loving stuff anymore, just walking into the room. It's like they anticipated that she was there, and they seemed to like that she was there. Then the guy that was indifferent walked in all by himself, and the plants had almost no response. I mean, he was just there, and then he left just like before. But the minute the guy came in, the Tory guy, that had beat the hell out of one of them with a stick, all of the plants in that room measured a fear response. Like they were that aware of his presence, and every one of them. Now that indicates a sentience, and this is Mythbusters. You can find the video out there, and I'm paraphrasing it, but essentially that's the deal. And they were all blown away because these are scientifically minded people, but they had to acknowledge that, look, these plants, they seem to know which one of us was entering the room and had a valid and correct response based upon the actions that we showed them. And it does show an intelligence that we don't attribute to these things just because they're plants, they're trees, they're whatever. You see a weed, you pull it, and yet when you talk about this intelligence, And this presence, why not? I mean, it's no different. If it has an intelligence, then why can't it have a spirit? So I'm just putting that out there to any of you out there that might be like, what the heck are you guys talking about? Well, that's literally it. I mean, is it so hard to believe that if something can recognize that someone walked into the room and was trashing one of your friends and it creates a fear response, that's intelligence. So these things have a measure of intelligence that is very human-like, and we dismiss those things so readily, but it's been demonstrated, it's been proven. So, do your own research, of course, everybody, but I think that is nothing short of profound.
And I can't quote which studies, but I've seen a lot of studies over the years, not just that one, but lots and lots and lots of similar studies that have shown that plants will have a stress response, a positive response or a stress response, depending on the behaviors of the people and depending on the words that are spoken and the tone of voice and all sorts of things. It's pretty fascinating.
Now, Ninja Dave in the chat says, my encounter with heat, I don't know what heat means, but possibly an elemental came running by me, came just after having had a close encounter with a large wild boar running away from the boar, usually running away from me. Boar usually charge at you and not run away from you. That's pretty wild. I think I'm not getting the whole context of that, but that's pretty incredible. I'm just scrolling here. There's another farms got another comment. He said there's a whole TED Talk presentation on it. Paul Stamets also did experiments with mushrooms, mycelium webs communicating between trees and plants in the forest. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Wow. That's amazing. So yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that there's a whole lot. Now, if any of you, I don't know, did you see the movie Avatar, the first one when it came out?
Yeah.
I don't think that's so much science fiction. I really don't. I think that there's this incredible web of interplay in our natural world that we've become either just desensitized to because we're so far removed with our technology and our focuses and practices that we've kind of got these blinders onto this stuff. But I think our ancient ancestors knew this stuff really, really well and used it to their benefit.
Yeah, and the thing is what I literally experienced, the last place that I lived out in Kansas, rural Kansas, that when I spent lots of time outside, like I'm talking like 8 hours a day outside, my psychic vision and my psychic knowing like opened up big time. And I literally was vibrating at the same frequency as the environment around me. Whereas before that, when I was just staying inside my house, I wasn't really, I was tuned in because I kind of have that natural ability, but I wasn't, it was 10 times more. I was 10 times more tuned in to the energies of the earth because I wasn't inside watching TV and all that stuff. I was outside, and the more outdoors we can be, the more connected we are. So if you think back to years and years ago when people were roaming the land, they weren't inside their house 24 hours a day or inside their house, inside their car, inside their workplace, and then back home to watch TV. They were outside, and the more that people are outside among the natural element, the more, like, it wasn't even called psychic skills back then. It was just like they knew things. They knew if if like rain was coming, or like they could feel it in the air, or where they could sense where the river was so they could get water to drink. They could sense if a wild animal was near because their senses were more heightened.
Right.
Yeah,
it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Farm says they can literally send and receive nutrients from each other through the mycelial webs. Yeah, that's incredible. There was another comment I thought somewhere here, and I missed it. There was another guy that I heard talk to that talked about that there's something to do with the cells that are on plants are not dissimilar from the cells in our eyes as far as perceiving light and recognizing things. And he went on and on. It was just profound, but I can't remember most of what he said, but I was just like, oh, that's just amazing. So I know we've got about 35 minutes left, but I want to hit on the gnomes too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's talk about the gnomes. I have like the tiniest story though before we get into the gnomes.
Oh, please.
When I was living out, the last place that I lived out in rural Kansas was this place that was connected to this farmland, and that spring I went and bought flowers at the local nursery. I brought them home, and I didn't plant them right away. It was like a couple days later, and then when I had put them in the ground, planted them, gave them some water, and a couple of hours later, I was inside my house, and I decided to walk out onto my front porch where the flowers were just to look at them. I walked out the door, and I immediately heard them singing, but it wasn't like a human voice. It was like this vibration.
Oh, neat.
It was like this the flowers were singing. And it was interesting that they weren't doing that when they were just in the little pots.
Right.
It was when they were put in the earth.
Oh.
And then the next spring, when I bought flowers again, the same exact thing happened. So there was something about them being like really happy that like we've been planted.
Right, that they were connected. Yeah.
So the gnomes, that happened at that same house, the house that was on the edge of a farm. And I think I had lived there for a couple of months. And this was an example of, I think the local elementals wanted to get to know me a little bit before they really connected with me. And now also reminding everybody that before I had this encounter with gnomes, I didn't really know if they existed. I kind of thought, well, it's probably just children's stories. I don't know. Sure. Again, open-minded skeptic. It's possible, but I don't really know. Yeah. So I didn't really believe in them. And so I'm in my bedroom. It's evening. It's after dark, and the weather's nice. So I have the windows open, and it's not bedtime yet, so I still have the light on, but I'm just like lying on top of my covers, just like hanging out. And I'm talking out loud to myself. I don't really know why I was doing that, but I was just kind of talking some things out. And again, it was back to some health issues. I was talking about how I'm feeling and that I was struggling with a few health things. And I was just like specifying what those were. And I was just talking out loud. Again, I have no idea why I was doing that. But then all of a sudden on the outside of the window, so not inside my house, but the outside of the window, this gnome guy, male gnome, jumps up into the onto the window. So he's like on the other side of the screen, and he's standing there, and he was like maybe 3 feet tall or 2 feet tall. I'm not very good with measurements, but so he wasn't really tiny, and he wasn't like human size. And he was wearing the clothes that you would think of that we see gnomes depicted as, like the kind of pointy hat and all the clothes that we think of, like when we see like the garden gnome kind of figures. Like he was dressed like that. And he actually sat. So I think it was like a psychic hearing, but I wasn't like hearing in a distinct auditory way. It was like he was saying things to me, but I don't remember like hearing in the same way that we're hearing each other. Mm-hmm. But he told me the name of a plant that would help me. And he said that I should use bladderwrack because I was having, well, I'll save that little detail. But he said, you should use bladderwrack. And I'm like, what's that? Is that for your bladder? Like, what is that? I didn't know what it was at the time.
Right.
So I took mental note of it, and I'm like, oh, that's like, and also I didn't know that gnomes existed, and here one is. Okay, that was cool. But I've had so many weird things happen in my life that I'm like, oh, okay, so that's a thing. And then the next day I looked up bladderwrack, mm-hmm. and I was amazed because it is specifically, it's a type of seaweed that's used for thyroid issues. And my main problem at the time was thyroid issues. And I started taking it because of that information from the gnome. I started taking bladderwrack, and I was able to correct, like literally through the blood tests, I was able to show that I went from things being really imbalanced to balanced within, it took a few months.
Wow.
But just he told me. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So to me, that information, so it wasn't just some like, hello, how are you?
Right.
It was literally like information that I then validated, and it fit completely, and it was very helpful to me. Yeah. And to me, that validated that what I saw was actually there. It wasn't nothing. Right.
That's incredible, because it seems to suggest an awareness of not only, that you're there and what you're doing, but also all about you. I mean, like this being knew not only that something was wrong, but could suggest to you how to correct it. And that to me is really incredible, because it suggests a knowing that we well, very few of us can tap into. I mean, maybe there are some incredibly spiritual people, and maybe even yourself being able to tap into that. But I think that's incredible. Like it was very intimately aware of you and your situation.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool.
It is. It's incredible.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it. It's incredible.
I actually had something similar, but not with gnomes, but with elves out here at my place in southern Arizona in the desert. Wow. So again, out here, it took a couple of months before I really started to get a sense of where they are, because they're really not up close in this neighborhood.
Okay.
And I had a situation where I did a phone healing session for a client. Mm-hmm. And during that session, I just felt guided to do this visualization with her with a tree. And I won't go into all the details of the session, but then later I went outside for my evening meditation, and I'm just gazing out at the mountains and the desert and a couple of trees. And I go into a vision state, which sometimes happens to me. So I zone out. And when I zoned out, there was this elf. So he wasn't like in the yard, mm-hmm. the same as with the gnome story jumping up into my window. I went into an altered state. I saw these two elves, male, one like elderly and one like more mid-aged.
Okay.
And they both said to me that what you did in that session today was druid magic. And they were happy that I did that. And I was like, oh, because I was working with the tree and the elemental, the et cetera, during that session. And I said, oh, I didn't realize that exact practice was Druidic.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another time when I was outside and I connected with these same beings, and I received a message. And again, it was not auditory and it wasn't like gut feeling. It came through here into my third eye. It was telepathic. And I got the message from them, not weed. And I, again, what is that? I've never heard of that before. Right. And then I looked it up, and it was literally like exactly for the issues that I was dealing with. And so I've had these 3 instances. The first time was from the flower garden. The second time was from the gnome and the gnomes on the land. Uh-huh. And then this elf colony. And by the way, the elves, I feel like the way they communicated with me was more from a distance, because they don't like to come to my neighborhood. So they live out in the valley. So on a daily basis, I just send them some love and blessings. Blessings to all of you way out there, miles away. But they gave me this like information that was really helpful to me.
That's so cool. You know, the other thing I got to wonder is it
was literally last week.
Wow.
Last week.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
The neat thing is that, I mean, I do believe these things are out there, and how they're out there and how do they normally exist versus these moments, I don't know. I don't really understand the dynamics of that, but I really feel like this yearning that maybe our ancestors were so in balance and so in touch that they just were aware of these things all the time, you know, like whenever they were around, they could see them because they were, you know, much more open than we are now. But if we could somehow return to that balance and that awareness, because I mean, just there's an old story, especially like the old gnome, and the old story comes, well, it comes from allegedly from a guy that was he was a commander with the Roman army, and his name was Publius Octavius. And I can't remember the year it was written, and I got it saved somewhere on my hard drive when I stumbled across it, but it's an excerpt from an old, his old diary. And he basically settled in the Netherlands after the expansion up into England, and you know, they drew back, and he just kind of settled in the Netherlands there, and he came to know this little diminutive creature who looked like what we would describe as a gnome. And he would go out and see it, you know, running through the meadows and tending to wounded animals and things like that, and apparently, allegedly befriended it. And what this thing told him is that they were an ancient race known as the Kuwalden, Kuwalden. And there weren't as many of them left now, but they were basically stewards of the natural world. And according to this, the guy had a discussion with it. So it was like, and I don't mean it in a dismissive way. I just mean I don't know exactly how to quantify what this being is, but it's just kind of a fascinating idea that some of our ancient forebears, and maybe it still happens, I don't know, but perhaps people don't talk about it much if it does, but that they were able to actually have relationship with them in a friendship, you know, sort of way. And I just think what amazing things could these things reteach us that we've lost, these beings, these, you know, these whatever exactly they are. What could they show us, and how could they show us to live that would keep us in balance and help the world around us and help each other? And, you know, what would the quality of our life be? Now, you know, I'm not suggesting being anti-modern world. I love technology and all that it brings to the table, but I think we've got to find a balance, you know, to this amazing, you know, rush of technology with the natural world around us. So, but you know what I mean? It's like the idea that they were able not only to have a moment, like I think you are so incredibly fortunate to have seen these things yourself. You know, like seeing that gnome and having to give you medical advice, I think is just just incredible. You know, it's a lot cheaper than going to the doctor too. So I mean, that's a win on two ends. But you know, does that what I'm saying make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I just jotted down a couple of thoughts as you were talking. Like if we were able to live in a world like you were speaking of, where we were all a lot more attuned to the natural world. That you asked the question, what would that teach us? Mm-hmm. And I think it would teach us to have more presence. Yeah. And in our modern world, most of us are not really present. It just is. Where our monkey mind is going all the time. And a lot of times we're checked out. We're on social media all the time, and we're just not really like present, like really like anchored into our body, right? And then the other thing that we would gain or learn is being able to walk through the world and just knowing what plants we can eat. Yeah. What plants are medicinal. And I don't claim to have that knowledge, but there are some amazing people who are very earth connected herbalists who are amazing at doing that. But I think all of us would just have that natural ability if we were spending a lot more time in the elements.
You know, I had an interesting experience once, and I never really knew what to do with it. But now that I'm talking with you, it makes me wonder, wait a minute, was this an experience that I had, perhaps getting a message from a plant? And what it was is it was actually at the local plant nursery back when I lived in Minnesota. My mom got these flowers. I think they're called angel trumpets. And they made these beautiful white flowers, and I really loved the plant and it was doing well, so I just planted it outside. And even though there was winter, but in the spring it came back and it turned into these two bushes on my sidewalk. They were just gorgeous. But my son at the time, I have three children, but my middle son, Oliver, and I were outside at our house, and we were going to pick up some of the flowers, and he was reaching for one of the seed pods. They would make these seed pods, and I was like, all of a sudden this message like, no, that it's not good for him. It could be poisonous. And so I said, no, let's not touch that. Now I knew nothing about this plant other than it made these beautiful white flowers and it was really cool. And I was like, don't touch that. You know, that's not good. And so we went and washed our hands from the things we did touch, and then we got gloves and cleaned up the things that we had to clean up. But I didn't know that. Now later on, I found out that, and in fact, I think angel's trumpet's not even allowed anymore, because what they had was these apparently a bunch of kids were eating them like Tide Pods, these seed pods, because there's apparently some kind of psychoactive agent in them, but you can also overdose just from the oils in this thing. So I didn't know, but that message just came to me like, no. And I sat back myself going, what the hell do I mean? No, what am I saying? I don't know anything about this plant, but somehow I knew that my child shouldn't be touching this. Like it would not be good for him. So I don't know. But it didn't click until right now. It's like, wait a minute, you know, maybe I don't know if it was perhaps the plant or some other intelligence that was watching going, no, that's not good. You know, what do you make of that?
I feel like it was a combination of things. It was a combination of the plant of the plant letting you know, just like the plant was being helpful and friendly and like, hey, just so you know, tap, tap, tap. And then I think it was also your connection with your son. Many parents have this connection with their kids that like they know if their child is in potential danger, like
Mhm.
it's that spidey sense that,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's mother's intuition, father's intuition. And I think some of that kicked in. It was this natural protection.
Mhm.
And it could have been also, perhaps angelic, like
Mhm.
one of your guardian angels was helping to keep you guys safe.
Mhm.
So to me, that feels like it was kind of a combo
Yeah.
situation.
Okay. Yeah, it was just out of nowhere. It's like, and even after it left my lips, I'm like, what? But I just knew there was something about those seed pods that were not good. And I didn't know what it was, but I felt like poison, like they're poisonous. And it turns out that they are. So, but it's just I actually had another situation. I don't know if it's a story. I'll share it with you after the show, and maybe I'll share it on the show sometime. But where I had an absolute premonition when I was taking Oliver for a walk to the store, and I don't know that he was in mortal danger, but he was in danger, and I knew it was coming. I had a vision of it happening, and then boom, it happened, and I reacted in such a way as I'm like, how did I do all that? I don't even know how I did it all, but I was able to protect him and move him out of danger, and to get the danger away in one fluid motion. It was it was one of those like Spider-Man moments, like you said. It was like, where did that come from? But again, maybe it was the connection, and like you say, like a psychic link of some kind, and perhaps a forewarning by some guiding presence. But yeah.
Yeah. And thank goodness.
And we all know stories about, like, speaking of like plants and stuff again, that trees and being in the forest is very good at lowering stress. Like clinically, a lot of doctors or psychologists, when they're dealing with people dealing with high levels of stress, they'll say, go take a walk in nature, go sit in nature, go to a park and sit and I think that it's not just the fact that they're away from the stressful things, but it's also, I think that the energy does kind of wash through us and is cleansing. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And there are a lot of studies about how being in nature does all sorts of amazing things for your body and your mind and your central nervous system, and it's very calming. It's good. It's good for everybody.
Yeah, it is. And then when you think on top of that, all of these other entities that maybe that we're not aware of, but are interacting with us on a different level than what we're consciously able to focus on. And that's really cool too. I love the idea that these things are a part of our world and we're a part of their world. I just wish we had more of a cognition awareness of them, because again, how much could they teach us? How much could they help? Especially given the madness of the world right now, when we're just in this really weird state of whatever the hell's going on. And what guidance could they offer to help us make this transition so much more smooth?
Well, and another thing that comes to mind is the fact that, whether the listeners believe in us having an energy field, a personal energy field around our physical being, if you're in a room with other people, you are mingling energy fields with the people. But on the same vein, if you're outside and there are trees and other living things, you're sharing and mingling energy with them as well. It's not woo-woo. It's like literally wherever you are being affected by the energy around you, and you are affecting the energy around you as well. So if you sit by a tree, you and the tree are, like, you're exhaling breath, and the tree is inhaling what you're breathing out. Like, you're literally exchanging energy that way. And then also, your aura and the plant's aura. So this is why if you go and sit by a tree, you feel better. If you were stressed out before, you go sit out there, or you go sit out in the sunshine, or wherever you're sitting, you feel better. And then it's a great way to discharge some of that chaotic energy of our modern era.
Yeah, absolutely. Aggravated Progressive says, my local trees are what I like, but I stay away from them in a way. Huh. I understand. And it's maybe if you're not quite on that ready to, I don't know, link up that way or whatever. I don't know. I don't really know what to say to that. I guess I just find that it's incredibly cleansing and it's incredibly centering. And maybe it's also just getting, like we were talking about before, just getting out of the madness that we're in. And you really do, when you're sitting in a quiet place or a natural place and just watching nature be nature, that is so therapeutic. Somebody said that they love the mountains. I think it was Mrs. Donna Carter, or Cantor rather. I love being around trees and planting, she says. Yeah. And that's also, I guess, a balancing thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. And you can also ask, you can make a request to be in contact, to open up communication with certain aspects of nature. And I'll share a little tiny story here. When I was living in a neighborhood in Kansas, it was the street that I was on was a little bit more naturey than most neighborhoods. And so I heard the neighbors talking about how there was a mountain lion that was spotted coming through the area. Oh. And I thought, oh dear, because at the time I had 2 cats that I would let outside and they would run around, and I didn't want anything to happen to them. And so I made a request.
A valid menu option.
Oh, that's weird.
Oh yeah, that's weird. So I made just a prayer request. I sent out this request to the mountain lion, and I said, if you're in the area again, can you send me a dream so that day I won't let my cats outside? Oh. And a couple weeks later, I had a dream, and all it was in the dream, I just saw a mountain lion walk by, and it looked at me, and then it kept on walking. And I woke up, and I said, okay, so my pets are not going outside today. Right. And lo and behold, that night or early the next morning, one of my neighbors said, oh yeah, we hadn't seen the mountain lion in a while, but we saw it again yesterday.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. You know, and it does make you, oh, hold on, I got a cough. It makes you really kind of appreciate the level of magic that is still in this world that we've just forgotten about, that we've just lost somehow, and that it's still there. I mean, it's still this kind of esoteric idea or living is still possible. I mean, because it's a communication between you and this animal somehow. And that to me is just, it's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, and we can communicate with them through our dreams, and it's not just a dream. It's not just like, oh, it's nothing because it was a dream. It was a communication, and sometimes it's easier for whether it's animals or plants or fairies or other elementals that you're trying to connect with, or spirits or loved ones on the other side, like whatever. They a lot of times have an easier time connecting with us during the dream state because we're a lot more open. It's just easier for them to get through.
Yeah. Android Paranormal also is playing, has a comment about the whole nature thing as well. He said, I just recently watched testimonials on walking barefoot outside on the ground that will ground you and can heal chronic pain. Yeah, I know that walking barefoot is definitely been shown clinically to take help with inflammation. If you have chronic inflammation, that it'll, that grounding or those negative ions or whatever that interact as we're, grounding barefoot on the soil is very powerful. But what do you think of that, Maya?
I'm totally into that. And anybody who's interested, you can Google benefits of earthing, not earthling, but earthing.
Earthing. Okay.
Earthing. And you can probably get similar results if you put benefits of grounding. But earthing is the word for on purpose going out with bare feet or just sitting on the ground and being in contact with the earth, and the health benefit, like measurable health benefits of doing that.
Yeah, I've always been barefoot every chance I can get. In fact, that's why I'm really excited that it's finally warming up because, currently I'm not wearing socks anymore, which is a step in the right direction. But pretty soon I'll be able to actually go out barefoot again. And that to me is my happy place. I love that feeling.
Great. That's great. So, and anything else we want to talk about since we're almost out of time?
Well, anything else you want to throw out, and definitely, close out with let people know how to stay in touch with you.
Yeah, well, it was great having this conversation and sharing with everybody. And definitely, if you want to stay in touch, there's a couple of ways that you can do that. The first way is through my free Facebook group, and that is called Psychic Protection Sanctuary, and it's the Facebook group, not the page. And that's an interactive group, daily discussions. But just a heads up, you do have to answer the 3 questions so that I know you're not a bot.
Yeah.
So that I know you're a real person. You have to answer the questions. The other way you can stay connected is through my YouTube channel, and that's also called Psychic Protection Sanctuary. And then if you're somebody that just kind of forgets and loses contact and you want to get on the email list to just kind of keep you on board, you can go to my website, also psychicprotectionsanctuary.com, and just sign up for the email list. I usually only send out 1 email a week, as opposed to the common trend of multiple emails a day. I don't know why that's popular right now. But I usually just send 1 out per week, and then it'll just be like my newest video or whatever, a lot of free content.
Oh, fantastic.
So those are some ways you can stay connected.
Okay, so in wrapping this up, let's say some of our listeners out there want to learn to get in touch with these other kind of intelligences. What could you recommend to them as good first steps in doing this and getting into the right mindset or whatever?
Yeah, it's very easy, but sometimes easy is hard.
Okay.
Because it takes us outside of what we're used to doing.
Okay.
So the way that you can increase your chances of having any of these kinds of communication is to spend time outside. And that sounds easy, but a lot of times we hear something and then we don't do it, sure. Right? Yeah. It's easier to stay inside and just be on our computer or whatever, or to go outside, but we're like tethered to our phone and we're not really present. So when I say spend more time outside, you can be sitting, you can be walking, hiking, camping, whatever, but be present, like have a presence, like be still and not distracted with non-nature things like your phone.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's a good first step. And I think it's probably good therapy for everybody anyway, to kind of unplug every once in a while and get back to a balance. But no, this has been a marvelous discussion. And I'm really thrilled that so many of you guys in the chat have been participating in our discussion tonight. I really appreciate all the stories and things you guys brought to the table. Because when we were starting out, I was like, well, I'd like to hear from people. I'm like, well, I know that some people will, but hopefully a lot of people will. And you guys did. You really showed up. And so thank you for being a part of the discussion, because I know Maya feels the same way. We don't want to talk at you. We want to talk with you. And you guys brought some great experiences to the show, and thank you so much. Thanks for the call, Farm. We appreciate it. Again, I hope you guys stay in touch with what Maya's doing and keep following that. Thank you so much for coming on, Maya. This has been great.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's always my pleasure, and I didn't have to talk as much, though. with the way my tongue.
I love to talk.
Oh, perfect.
I love it.
With the way my mouth was working at the beginning of the show, I'm like, oh, thank God Maya's here. So that's going to wrap it up for us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here and being part of the journey. I'll be back tomorrow night with Sheldon, and we'll have another 2-hour adventure into the Paranormal Portal. I hope you guys will join us, and that's at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time right here on YouTube. So hopefully you guys will tune in, and I'm not sure where I'm taking you tomorrow, but it's bound to be great because that's what I try to make every show. So you guys take care. Remember, we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other. Help each other out. Find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh as much as you can. And I'll see you guys tomorrow night. So if you're not there, just, I might be taking attendance, and there might be a pop quiz. You never know. So tune in. Good night, everybody.
Bye.